Okay. You ready, Kevin?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And welcome to the Endangered Places Speedway case study. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Kara Anderson. I'm with the Architectural Heritage Foundation, and I'm here with Kevin Allen from GCR's Historic Curatorship Program. And we're here to talk about one of Preservation Massachusetts' former most endangered places, historically known as the Charles River Speedway headquarters and administration buildings. The project is now more affectionately and simply called the Speedway. Once a very much stuck project, the Speedway, which is located in the Brighton section of Boston, was listed back in 2010. And since then, there have been years of collective effort to bring this resource back to life, essentially transforming an aging and underutilized surplus state-owned property into a thriving and dynamic community market and gathering place for the Brighton neighborhood and beyond. So just a few words about how the session will be organized. Kevin will start us off with a synopsis of the Speedway's unique history up until the recent past, when the property was put out to the development community as a rehabilitation and long-term management opportunity. Kevin will also talk about the Historic Curatorship Program and how the Speedway came to be a part of it. And that's where AHF comes in. I'll walk you through the story of how we collectively brought the Speedway back online as a prominent feature of the Charles River Reservation and as an attractive destination for the public in general. After that, we'll have a question and answer period. So as we go along, we would just ask that you type your questions into the Q&A dialog box on your Zoom screen. And we'll do our best at the back end to facilitate a good discussion. So actually, I want to say one thing before we start, and that's that Kevin and I both have a great deal of passion and connection to this project and the buildings themselves. In the intervening years since we've been involved, there have been significant milestones. We used to joke that we'd still be working on it when our kids went to college. They're now in middle school and second grade, so we made the cutoff, but you may get a sense of that connection as we proceed. And we're not alone. The community was loud and clear in their commitment to the buildings and making the opening of the project even more significant to all of us. So I'm going to now share my screen and we'll turn it over to Kevin. You just give me a technical second here. Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
All right, there we go. So thank you, Kara, and thanks everybody for coming today and to kind of learning about the process we went through to make this very difficult project happen. So just as a background, when we say Speedway, hopefully that becomes a buzzword this year, a place to be in Boston. And so, but what's the origins of that? The first slide here shows this is the Speedway. This is an 1897 plan. This was actually constructed in 1899, and the Speedway is one of the first recreational resources built by the new Metropolitan District Park Commission, or by which later became the Metropolitan District Commission, which is a predecessor agency of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, which has meant, among other things, the state park system, among many other things. So that goal of that original, that Metropolitan Parks Commission, was really to create a regional park system, America's first regional park system. So it started acquiring property in the 1890s around the Boston metro area, and the Speedway is one of these first projects. It was a 1.25 mile harness racing track, included pedestrian, bicycle promenade, as well as an oval track there in the center, which is now kind of where Herder Park, Artesani Park is, and it was built along the Charles River, following the contours of the bend of the river and following what is now Soldier Field Road. So as you're coming around Soldier Field Road up to Watertown and to the Arsenal Bridge, that was originally the track of the Speedway. So next slide, Kara, please. There we go. So the Speedway is enormously popular. This is really a way to kind of take a lot of the quasi-legal horse racing activity that was going on in this part of the city and kind of give it a place, a more controlled place for that to happen. But I think more importantly, as part of this turn of the century revolution and in Boston and other major cities, it really changed the relationship between nature and the Commonwealth's natural places and the public. As you may know, that Brighton was well known for its abattoirs and its vibrant meat processing industry. So the Speedway kind of started this process of redefining this area of the city and really reconnecting people back to this amazing resource. And the Charles, you see in this image, actually, it's still, clear cut. You still have a clear view of the river from part of the Speedway. So see, next slide, please. So as with all the facilities in this new regional park system, the headquarters and the maintenance building for the Speedway and the surrounding Upper Charles River area of the park of the reservation was really built to impress in this first initial stage. Designed by William Austin from the firm Stickney in Austin, it matched a lot of the other companion facilities like at Blue Hills and Nantasket, Revere Beach, many of these which are still extant today, with this projected goal of really providing this new world-class park system with world-class amenities and opening recreational access to everybody. So everyone, were once in much of the 19th century, parks are still a kind of a new idea and a private idea. This is a revolutionary to open up these sites to everyone and make them truly public. So next, please. So in addition to that connection, it's really one of the state park system's origin buildings. This is the old, one of the oldest buildings that's connected to, built by the Parks Agency for park use. In addition to that, it's also an architectural masterpiece. It's really a master class for the shingle style. It's got just mind-boggling asymmetry, turrets, gables of every size, height, location, dozens of different window sizes. This kind of unique rambling shingle style building in the stables really references the equestrian connections to the Speedway and the activities in this area, and also is a nod to some of the shingle style riverside boathouses that also are prominent in the area. So that eclecticism in the architecture is also seen in the floor plan, which a lot of people know this building just by passing by one of these two roads, either Western or Soldiers Field, but maybe don't understand kind of how it's really laid out. It's really this kind of serpentine floor plan that fits this constricted triangle that was required because the private ownership had butted up against one side, a parcel of owners who wouldn't sell. So the agency was really kind of restricted to this triangle. So what it created was a lot of linear building, but then also this kind of unique kind of cloistered courtyard. That's a key feature of the building's original use. It's a great maintenance yard, a great place to manage horses and automobiles, and then it also is going to have a huge role in the revival of the building. So here you can see all the functions of the park management in 1900. You've got stables for police horses. There's maintenance sheds, office space. There's a residence for the park superintendent as a feature at a lot of most of these kind of regional headquarters, and then the stables are actually converted to house the park police in the 1920s. So rehab, adaptive reuse by the same architect quickly after the horsepower was replaced by automobile power and around the 20s. So let's see, next slide, please. Thanks. So the building was used for park purposes throughout the century. As you can see, it was the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police Commission, Metropolitan District Commission Police, which later became the state police, or integrated into the state police. But over the years, the park uses declined. It no longer fulfilled the needs of modern park system. The MDC police became the state police and relocated it, and it became difficult to justify this kind of ongoing investment in this largely vacant landmark structure. Some of the spaces remained occupied, and DCR did invest a lot into stabilization to try to kind of buy some time for it, but it really slipped into decline due to the usual elements, the overgrowth, vagrancy, vandalism, and time. And just the nature of the eclectic architectural style of this building just creates just multiplies the problems and the maintenance issues that kind of built up. So DCR and our sister agency DCAM began to study the condition and look at the feasibility for rehab. And really no agency or other state use was coming up. And because of the enormous price tag, the building is really heading towards disposition. And that could have meant anything from selling the building to disposing of demolition of the property. That's what we were kind of down to. So again, the ultimate kind of stuck project. So, okay, next slide, please. So that's the sad part of the story, but then the kind of things turned around in the late 2000s. We had, when this discussion was happening about the future of the building, luckily we had the preservation community joining together to recognize the importance of this building. That was led by partially by Boston Landmarks Commission landmarking the building, but also a group brought together by the Boston Preservation Alliance, Historic Boston Incorporated, Preservation Mass, and MHC, the Brighton Allston Historic Society, and the neighborhood and the community really came together to advocate for the building's preservation. And the timing was really good on this because it really helped kind of to impact the decision on where we're going to go next. And so, in response, DCR added the building to the historic curatorship program, which Kara mentioned. I manage DCR, and that's a long-term leasing program. It gives us the ability to put properties out for public bids, specific properties that are historically significant enough that we don't want to lose, but that we don't have the resources to rehab or reuse. And so we look for outside partners who invest in the rehabilitation, the maintenance, and the management in return for a long-term lease. That's done through a widespread, through a open competitive process. We had that here. It was a widespread solicitation. Had a lot of interest and a lot of interested parties. We put out a formal request for proposals in 2013, and we received a lot of good proposals, including a very good one from Architectural Heritage Foundation. And now I'm going to transition over to Kara to talk about AHF's part of the story.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. It's always so nice to be reminded and so eloquently and interestingly to hear about the Speedway history. It's really so fascinating. I'd like to start off by just briefly describing the Architectural Heritage Foundations. I think that's an important part of the story. We're a 501c3 nonprofit developer with a broad mission to accomplish historic preservation. And we do that in a number of ways. In this case, through direct development and long-term stewardship. We were founded in the late 1960s, and our flagship project had been Old City Hall in Boston until just a few years ago, when our focus and commitments shifted to the Speedway and other projects. We have at times been called the patron saint of stuck projects. Ours are often hard ones with far off finish lines, but we saw at the Speedway a confluence of several things that allowed us to bring our resources to the table. A community desire and will to save these landmark buildings, dynamic market changes in an older yet evolving neighborhood that needed some counterbalance to that change, and willing and committed partners at the state agency level who believed in saving this resource and worked really very hard with us to find creative solutions to a complicated problem that Kevin outlined. As Kevin also mentioned, we were designated the developers back in 2014 after that lengthy public process. And the project experienced setbacks and evolved over time. Originally, there was a more complicated approach that involved housing, but precluded funding subsidies. Then it became a matter of formalizing the transaction, which involved purchasing land from the Commonwealth, the proceeds of which were reserved to fund the hard costs of the preservation project. This required enabling legislation filed by our local state representative, as well as an Article 97 land transfer. And then after a few long years of building a financing package around this structure, which consisted of federal and state historic tax credits, MHC and NPS were key players here, AHF equity, Article 97 land transfer proceeds, construction and permanent debt from Eastern Bank, and New Markets tax credits from Chase Bank. We were able to begin construction in the fall of 2019. And then COVID hit the following spring, pushing our timeline back and creating new challenges. But at that time, we worked really closely with DCR to ensure the safety of the contractors, while also stabilizing the buildings and protecting the years of time and investment that were at risk. Our leasing, at that time, our leasing strategies also evolved, but we were fortunate in that we had a committed anchor tenant prior to starting construction who stayed on board with us and pulled through to the other side. We were also able to develop flexible lease terms with our smaller tenants to give everyone the room needed to get a new project opened in the realities of 2021. And we also had the benefit, this is really important, of flexible lenders and investors who offered extensions and worked really closely with us on the delays. Okay, so our goal had always been to redevelop the Speedway buildings and courtyard into a mix of creative uses that would bring the community into the site to experience this historic setting in a contemporary and engaging way. We've always been committed to returning the Speedway to its past prominence in the Charles River Reservation and its place along the river, while also encouraging local entrepreneurship and community connections. And as the site begins to open, we're seeing all of these goals come together. I'm going to now walk you through the tenant mix, which is really a fun part of the story, and will hopefully entice you guys to come visit us when we come visit us next time you're in Boston. The group of tenants and uses that we have at the Speedway was curated and assembled with the help of Graffito SP, a local realty and placemaking group that has worked extensively in the Austin-Brighton market and spent years with us mapping out how to make the Speedway achieve short and long-term economic stability. So at present, we have a mix of food and beverage, retail, office and not-for-profit tenants, as well as an event space that AHF is now managing. We also moved our offices into the Speedway as another COVID pivot. And at the time, we just weren't sure how the office market was going to play out. And so we thought it made sense to, be all in, relocate ourselves to the Speedway and become rent-paying tenants to support the project. And that's been really fun. So we worked really hard to bring a diverse group of tenants together, beginning with our anchor tenant, Notch Brewing out of Salem, who opened their tap room and beer garden and brewery in July. So that's been very successful. Notch will soon be joined by House of Arts and Crafts, Super Bien, and Bellwether Salon, who are all part of our small vendor program who will occupy the former sheds and stables along Western Avenue. We wanted to be sure to round out Notch's presence with other food and beverage options. So along with Super Bien, who will be doing empanadas and South American specialties, we will also be featuring ice cream from Tipping Cow, who will be expanding from their Somerville location, hummus and Middle Eastern treats from Hummus Be Hummus. Some of you may be familiar with the Chubby Chickpea. It's a food truck that's been around Boston area for a while and really enticing Middle Eastern food. We're also excited to have signed Boston's first brick and mortar sake club. It's called the Koji Club. They'll also serve small bites and treats to go along with a really specialized sake tasting experience. Another kind of unique and interesting part of the project is that nonprofit participation was actually built into the enabling legislation, which required us to provide 300 square feet of office space to a Brighton nonprofit for $1 a year. We ran a public process this spring with a great turnout. In fact, it was so hard to choose that we decided to offer a space share to two nonprofit groups with connections to the Charles River. The Friends of Herder Park, who run the theater, the music and theater amphitheater program just down the reservation from us, and also the the Fishing Academy, which is a group that uses fishing in Charles and other local waterways as a way to build leadership skills for at-risk youth. We're also really excited to have just signed a 4-month pop-up with Cambridge Art Association, who will use the space in Building G for a gallery on the weekend and also for art classes during the week. And while everyone's not open quite yet, they'll be coming online soon. And we're just really super excited about all the creative and talented people who are now part of the Speedway family. Okay, and then just to kind of circle back to the original vision, which was, we think, fundamental to DCR, selecting us to be the redevelopers and long-term stewards of the Speedway. The community really saw the Speedway as an anchor to the Western Avenue corridor and a part of the city that is undergoing really rapid change. And it's always been It's always been about reactivating that anchor and creating a space for the community to gather and enjoy this unique setting while also reconnecting to its recreational roots. We were able to carry that vision forward, and I think Kevin and I agree that the collective commitments from us and DCR and the Brighton community and the preservation partners and all of the consultants and experts is really what has steered this project through the challenges and setbacks over the years. And I'm really pleased to share that we had the official opening the first week of September, so just a few weeks ago, and it was a really great way to mark the milestone of all this effort coming to fruition. It was really, really nice to welcome back key partners and advocates like Commissioner Montgomery from DCR and Representative Mike Moran, Commissioner Carol Gladstone from DCAM, and our funders at Eastern Bank. And it was really fun and really meaningful to bring them together with the new creative operators who will be at the helm for the next chapter of the Speedway story. So at this point, we thought it's hard to remember sometimes when you see the project now, like what state it was in when we started and how that declined even during the period that we were involved. So we thought we'd do a few and afters to just give you guys some of the impact of that those changes. This is a picture of the residence, which is at the corner of Western Ave, at the prow of Western Ave and Sodersfield Road ramp. This is a post 2015 fire that happened, which was a really scary time and a reminder to all of us, like to double down on the efforts to figure out the long-term plan for the complex. This is what it looks like today. This is actually where AHF's offices are in the nonprofit offices. This is a view actually from the what we now call the Upper Courtyard, looking towards the residents and the former administration offices. Again, post-fire, it was a constant battle with vegetation, weeds, and overgrowth, and also just trying to keep the buildings watertight and safe from elements and other challenges. Kevin has a lot of stories about raccoons and other unexpected visitors as the years went on. This is what it looks like today. It's the courtyard hosts the beer garden that spills out from the tap room at Notch. It's kind of hard to tell, but at the front of the courtyard towards the residents, there's another kind of space that's being used for different types of programming. On the weekends, we have yoga, we've had bar class. Our events manager has hosted children's music programs. And as our other tenants open up, there'll be much more, many more opportunities to activate that space, which is really fun. It's been really successful. This is a view of one of the porches along Sodersfield Road. We actually returned it to its original condition as an open porch. One of the really cold and uninviting views along Western Ave for all those years. They're one of two entrance portals that were not so welcoming before, but now during our operating hours, the gates are open. This is a great way it's the main way to enter the project from Western Avenue. And it's really neat and welcoming at night when the lights are on in the courtyard, and it's kind of an intriguing and engaging way to interface with the streetscape. This is a view of the maintenance garage it was historically known as Garage B. It's now being used as an event facility. We have found ourselves as the manager of this event space, which we weren't expecting. But we've been hosting parties, family parties, graduations, all different types of marketplaces. Once a month, we're hosting Boston Women's Market. We've worked with Black-owned Boston to do markets there as well, and some interesting music programs. And I would encourage you to look at the Charles River Speedway website to see some photos of how this space can really be transformed. It's a wide open garage, seven garage bays with doors that operate. So it makes it an ideal place right now for kind of an inside outside experience, kind of uniquely poised in the market to do that during a time when we're all feeling a little challenged by what's going on in the world. This is a view back up in the Upper Courtyard looking towards what's now the main tap room. Behind that garage door, on nice days, the garage door is rolled up and there's a beautiful bar that serves German and Czech style session beer from Notch. And this is a view looking towards the passageway from the upper courtyard down to the lower courtyard and leads to the event space at Garage B. And this was an interesting opportunity for us architecturally to bring back one of the conditions that originally had been a part of Austin's plan, which was what was originally a carriage deck that you could walk your horses up the deck and into the stable, and or also go off to the left where there were carriage washing stations. We brought back that original deck concept in order to provide accessibility to these buildings for everybody. So that was actually a really interesting conversation to have with the Park Service. Our architects at Brunner Cott, Henry Moss and Christopher Nielsen, really did a great job of being able to bring together different elements of the Speedway story, physical Speedway story, to make it work in an adaptive reuse setting for contemporary uses. So that's the background of the project. And again, I encourage you to go take a look at the website, and you can engage in it at a different, even more intimate level with our vendors and tenants. And I guess at this point, we will open the floor up, Kevin, to some questions.
I think we've got one that came up in the chat asking about the architect, who is Brunner Cott, actually formerly of Cambridge, now of Boston, I guess, which was great for everyone involved. Brunner Cott is well known as really one of the best historic architects in Northeast in the country, and so to having them on board and having Henry Moss and that group on board for us as the property owners was very comforting. Knowing how to work with the Park Service, and Kara can probably talk a little bit more about experience working with those guys. Yes,
yeah. So yeah, it was really there were a lot of challenges with these buildings. Just the pure physical state that was presented to the team in the beginning was a section of the building that had been burned out by a fire. Then there were just years of the property was monitored and maintained. There was just years of inability to address some maintenance issues that ended up being challenging. There was an enormous time spent documenting the conditions and kind of piecing through what the historical fabric, what was remaining, and how we were going to treat that under the Secretary of the Interior standards. There were discussions back and forth with the MHC about the different periods of the Speedway's history and how to interpret those periods. I alluded to the decks, the carriage decks before. We have, I think, 62 different window types that were painstakingly removed individually and restored. What could be restored was restored. What needed to be replicated was replicated in kind. So there was fabric to work with. There was recreation of original conditions, and there was also some flexibility about the new uses that we needed to put into these buildings in order to make it attractive to the market. So we had the benefit not only of Brunner Cott, but a really talented group of designers in our landscape architecture side. All of the engineers, from our civil engineers to the structural and mechanical, our geotech and environmental consultants, and if we're going to talk about that, it broadens out to the legal teams. The folks at McCrosty Historic Advisors actually came in and helped us as well to kind of wade through some of the challenges, and just really Fort Point Associates, who helped us on the permitting side, and again the partners at the state. I know I'm really broadening the answer to this question, but DCR and DCAM, all of the attorneys and staffers, Kevin and his team, Peter Sarowin, all those people who really were able to see a range of challenges across a spectrum, and then kind of check them off kind of in and out of each other over the years, but got us to a place where we were able to close the transaction with the state, and then close the financing, and then as we bring the tenants on, bring this place back to life. Yeah, and I just follow up on that, the number of people, again, with any complicated preservation project, I feel like we really had every issue you could possibly have with the project. And as you mentioned geotech, I totally forgot about our
enormous hazmat issues here as well, deep underground, not just in the building and the lead and asbestos that we had to deal with, but deep underground as well. And just the so many people that came together to make it work. And again, the public-private partnerships are not always easy. There's different priorities and different procedures and processes, bringing those together. And to do this, we brought in so many other elements that we're trying to balance throughout, over the years. We had some core folks from the DCR side, Joe Orfand and Patrice Kish early on, kind of gave the agency the confidence that rehabbing this could work and that there was a feasible answer to this. That Laura Dietz from our legal staff and Peter Severin, as I mentioned, 5 different commissioners, including current Commissioner Montgomery, 5 different administrations to have to kind of bring back on board with the project like this. DCAM, our state sister organization, did an amazing job, and Carol Gladstone, Commissioner, and her amazing staff. And as Kara mentioned before, Representative Michael Moran really kind of worked to hold a lot of this together. The city of Boston's also been supportive from the beginning. It's I think a lot of it is one of the things we can continue to take questions. And one thought is we had, as Kara and I maybe talk about a few of those things that did make this work. So I know like every smaller preservation, this is every preservation project is unique and it's hard to replicate the processes, but I think there are some similar veins here that really and some things that we held on to that I think really held us together that are applicable to other stuck projects. I know for us, DCR is an enormous agency, 500,000 acres of property. We manage a mind-boggling range of resources from beaches, pools, the entire Boston Metro Parkway system, 300 dams, a cemetery, campgrounds, playgrounds, the entire Boston water supply area, Metro Boston water supply area. And so when it comes to historic buildings that are unused, unneeded, and empty, and are going to need a lot of investment in time and political capital and financial capital, it's not always, it's hard sometimes. And so one of the things the HF really helped to bring that was really fostered by the preservation community's desire to see something great happen here was a vision, was a solitary vision. And Kara's talked about it, and that the core of that, like so many parts of this project have changed throughout the years, but the vision that stayed is this idea that this once, that courtyard was not a public space. It was, believe me, you didn't want to be in that courtyard most of the time, from the things that got, put there out of sight from the rest of the reservation. And so to make it a public space, to open those gates and to have that courtyard be a place where everyone could come and experience different activities in concert with their relationship to the river and the reservation and the bike path. And so that vision and that idea that with the tax credits and with the focus of a nonprofit developer who is a preservation developer and who has been committed to these kind of projects, we knew that what we were trying to achieve there, we knew there'd have to be changes. It's a rehabilitation, but the core of what was, can the public have access, and are we going to restore that? We're going to get back to that turn of the century exterior to where the building really still carries that it's and speaks for itself and really isn't overwhelmed by those changes. And again, working with Brewing and the designers and the contractors did an amazing job really tying that together. But for us, the commitment, I think, to HF to not give up on that vision, and for us to be able to carry it through, because again, we had ebbs and flows. We have changes of leadership and changes in funding where the appetite wasn't always great to kind of continue with this as it became more complicated. There is a point of where it's going to go too far to what really is in the DCR and the state's best interest. But that vision and that optimism always carried through, and HF did a really good job at that.
Yeah, I tell this story often because I think it's a great story, but I brought my then 4-year-old to the project. I had to take pictures of some condition for a report. And he looked around and he said, "Mom, what on earth are we doing here? This place looks totally haunted. And what are you doing? Like, what is this?" So, speaking to the power of preservation and collective will, now when he comes to the project, he looks around, he's like, totally gets it. Like, okay, so, it's really that simple, that it comes down to commitment and vision. And we were fortunate that that the buildings were able to survive the challenges. But yeah, it's great to see it come through. We had another question come in about documenting and the process of rehab. So and how that translates into marketing the project and actually getting bankers and funders and people with the foresight or the vision to want to locate their successful brewery in Salem or open up additional locations. So yeah, that was a real challenge. We did do our best to document the process as we went along. We actually had brought in a photographer to come and periodically record the different stages of construction. And we I think that was a part of the lease requirement with the curatorship program and something we would have done anyway. So we were really good at showing the bleak photos, and then it took some help of our architects, and we relied extensively on a set of renderings that we just promoted wherever we needed to that could show what the finished product would be. It was a challenge with our small vendors in particular. When we started, we did with the small vendors like an open call I guess we were supposed to start it in the fall of 2020, but we pulled it back. And I'm sorry, we were supposed to start in the spring of 2020. We pulled back and ended up pushing it into the fall and winter. And we hosted a series of COVID safe events where we invited makers and small business owners and entrepreneurs to come into the space to take a look take a look around. And at the very first tour, which was in December in December of that year, the woman from Koji Club came, and she really had to think long and hard about how her brick and mortar sake club could fit into this space, because the courtyard was still pulled apart, and we were nowhere near those spaces being finished. So we had to rely on everybody's ability to see through some of that distraction and sign up for it. And as time went on and the space became more evolved, it became easier, but that was certainly a challenge.
Got another question on budget funding and final cost. You answered a little bit of that.
Okay, yeah. So the project was about $14 million project in total. Hard costs in the $8 million range. The more complicated financing structure that we had, which involved, and actually the reason why the project was able to actually come out of the ground in the fall of 2019 was the access to the new markets tax credit allocation that we were able to work with Chase Bank on. That ended up bringing in some pretty hefty soft costs, but balanced out with a pretty big allocation that ended up being the final push across the start line.
Jack Glassman, Jack has a question about the former maintenance garages and oil and hazmat. Yeah, it's definitely, again, another problem here. As you may know, this building is adjacent, so we're building stuck on a little triangle, and then next to that was the Almy. I don't know if people remember. There's the Almy's building. It was a laboratory for a while, and it was also a department store. Later, the state police moved in. It was a big three, four story building on that site that the Harvard Health Center is on now, sits on now. So when that was demolished, unfortunately, because out of that, when it was a lab, a lot of solvents and things were put into the ground. That site is pretty good, but unfortunately, it kind of followed through underneath the Speedway site. So just to throw everything, just to make it more impossible, now we're looking at kind of underground plume of hazard. So there was a extensive process working, as Kara said, with GZA on both DCR and HF side to really figure out how to manage this going forward. And luckily we were not looking at like major excavation for this the project as it is now, so we didn't run into huge issues. The oil gas, we had I think 4 or 5 underground storage tanks, including gas tanks, were in people may remember, like right there on Soldiers Field, right in front of Garage B, and then in the courtyard. couple underground oil tanks in the front yard. Those are all removed and abated. And so, and then lead and asbestos. I mean, it's all, building's all lead, but asbestos wise, we took, I think DCR before the building kind of went over to the other side, did 3 or 4 abatement runs, and then we thought we got it all. But like with asbestos, until you start getting into a rehab, you can never say you've gotten it all until you open up and HF found some more. And so it's another big big part of this project. So
yeah, and we were able to mitigate the sort of underground, mitigate the effects of the plume, and it was only under certain buildings. And so the tool for that was to install vapor mitigation barrier systems. So there's a containment and a ventilation process that address those concerns in the hazmat. It was actually another important thing that prior to taking site control of the property, that DCR did remove all the underground storage tanks. It made it a lot easier. And we've worked closely with Rob Lowell and Kevin as we've done the mitigation through the construction process to make sure we are complying with the state and working through it. So
looks like Jack has a kind of follow up there on a question regarding building system infrastructure. Is there a certain amount of MEP in the shell work, but also in the tenant build out, and asking about whether you guys under the master lease established design guidelines for what happened in those spaces?
Yeah, so with the larger, like I guess I'll say the larger tenants would be Notch and the event space, and the spaces in the former police station, which are not actually occupied yet. But so there's a certain amount that the landlord would provide, and then the tenant would take over. And so the systems were designed to a certain point. And then, yes, so our architects would make sure that anything that was done, any work done by the tenant would be in compliance, and all that was approved through the Part 2 and requires our approval as part of leases. In some of the smaller spaces where what we were really trying to do was have kind of plug in, I guess for lack of a better way to say it, like plug and play spaces for these small business owners. The landlord, HF took charge of all of the MEP on the MEP side, and actually and all of the utilities that come to those spaces, so that those tenants could just come in and come out as the market evolved and as their experiences there evolved. So we just made those spaces ready according to the what we submitted in the Part 2, ready for them to sort of come in and just easily establish themselves. And we've also used a form of agreement with them that offers maximum flexibility on the operational side as well. So we're not signing long-term leases and keeping these guys on the hook for the next 5 years. And what we're doing are these short-term license agreements, 1 to 3 years. And in one case, it was even less, just to kind of try it out and make sure it worked. And then as their operating and opening experience evolves, we can extend, and they could say, hey, this is working for us, or it's not working for us, and it's sort of easy in, easy out. So we expect that those small vendor spaces will have some degree of turnover as we go along.
And that's helpful for us. Again, we're as the state is kind of the master landlord. We really tried to encourage that those sub agreements are, really looked at as kind of have to give these guys flexibility on both sides, because again, one of the challenges here, when Kara was talking about the financing, a big elephant in the middle of the room with all of these properties that we've got 24 plus that have been preserved through this program, and with all of those, the challenge of financing is you don't own the building and it's a lease. And while HF has the situation through the legislation to allow to kind of capitalize on with the transfer of a parcel, the main parcel still is under lease. And so in terms of financing, it can be challenging. So it's helpful for us to know that. And for us, it's this is really a disposition of interest in state properties, because it goes to Article 97. It really comes with a lot of responsibilities of ownership, and so it's we've felt confident, know that it's good that when you've got these that subtenants is a big part of AHF's job, aside on top of just maintaining all the incredible rehab work they've done, is that ongoing responsibility of managing and continuing to manage the property through the term of the lease. I think that's all the questions. We have one. Well, I guess the question that related to the making the spaces viable, and Carrie talked a little bit about that, and relative to meeting preservation standards. In a lot of ways, we're lucky in some ways because we've got mostly a one-story building. We only have one section that had a second story. So from accessibility standpoint, it seems like we're in good shape, but nobody realizes just how far Western Ave drops off down to Soldiers Field. It's a really it's kind of a big drop, and so to catch up the elevation, and Carrie talked about like integrating and reintroducing that ramp to the former stable really allowed for some accessible flexibility to be able to get up to be able to meet that challenge. Also, the different buildings they're not all on the same grade. Also, there's a lot of grade change inside. So, but again, luckily having having Bruner Cotton, having the Park Service really kind of, and the guidelines established by the Boston Landmarks Commission as the landmark really sets the bar and establish, okay, these are the things that we don't want to, that were the lines we're going to draw. And maybe in the interior courtyard, if we had other images that we had these sliding, there's sliding doors. It was a courtyard, and the idea was, well, how do we continue to retain those spaces to show that those stables were still there, we're making them viable. And Kara, I think we've done a great, the architects did a great job in accomplishing that.
Yeah, so I guess sort of more on the technical side, pretty early on, we did a blue sheet review with MHC and MPS to sort of test the waters on what the give and take was going to be for some of those applications, and how we were going to, be able to, for instance, make those sheds and horse stalls along Western Ave be four-season conditioned space. And so, yeah, so using a glass storefront that was a little bit recessed, that still felt that openness of those open sheds, still felt that permeability of the open sheds. Another big issue was what we would do in the former police station, which originally had been a cow barn in the basement and stables on the first floor. There was an original condition where there was a hayloft above the stables, and so we were able to pretty early on figure out that we could interpret back to that condition in order to make the space. At the time, we thought that was going to be a restaurant space, so sort of make a loft. We introduced that loft and open up that space to make it more attractive to a restaurant use. So there was definitely a lot of back and forth, and we were fortunate that we were able to engage early on with MHC and the Park Service. And now that space is we've actually made an adjustment in the former police station, where that likely will be rented out as office space, kind of as an interim use, while the rest of the world comes online. I think we're actually getting to the end. I just got to know.
We are. And then if there's no other questions, I just want to say I want to make sure to say thank you to HF from our perspective, and to let, if there's any kind of final, parable from this going forward, is like, don't give up on these projects. Like Kara and I are intrinsically connected here through the history of this. We didn't have glasses. We didn't have before this happened. We've both had literally our blood, sweat, and tears are part of this project. But I guess I just say, like, as an inspiration, this many times we didn't think we knew if this was going to happen, and so it did. And so that's my kind of final word on it.
That's great, Kevin, and likewise, thanks to you and DCR and the team that made this happen. It's a great story.
All right. Well, thank you all. You've got our links.
Yeah, thank you.
Contact information. If anyone has any questions about the project or the historic curatorship program, or please make sure to reach out to Karen or myself.
Great. Okay. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye.